The Forgotten Bond. The dim glow of neon lights flickered in the smoky air of the space station's bar. Alex sat at a small table in the corner, nursing a glass of something bitter and staring at a worn-out photograph. The image showed a young human boy, no older than 10, standing next to a small alien girl with bright, curious eyes. Both were smiling, their arms slung over each other's shoulders. It was the only memory Alex had left of his adopted sister, Surya. 30 years had passed since the attack that tore their family apart. 30 long years of wondering if she was still alive. He traced a finger over the girl's face in the photo. "Surya," he whispered under his breath. "Where are you?" The sound of a chair scraping across the floor snapped him out of his thoughts. A hooded stranger had taken the seat across from him. Alex tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the knife strapped to his belt. The stranger, a tall figure cloaked in shadow, slid a small object across the table. It was a glowing locket, identical to the one Surya had worn the day she was taken. Alex's heart skipped a beat. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice sharp with desperation. The stranger leaned forward, their face still hidden under the hood. "Looking for her." The voice was low, almost a whisper. Alex couldn't tell if it belonged to a man or woman. "Tell me where she is," Alex said, gripping the locket tightly. His knuckles turned white as he fought to keep his emotions in check. The stranger chuckled softly. "Patience, human. If she's who you think she is, you might not like what you find." Alex slammed his fist on the table, drawing a few glances from the other patrons. "I've waited 30 years. I need to know." The stranger sighed and leaned back. "There are whispers. On the planet Thelios IV, there's a leader, a warrior who's united the rebel factions. They call her the Silver Flame. Some say she's different. She doesn't belong to any known species. But be warned, if this is your sister, she's not the girl you remember." Before Alex could ask more, the stranger rose and disappeared into the crowd. The locket's soft glow pulsed in his hand like it was alive. Could it really be her? Could Surya have survived all these years and become some kind of leader? And if so, why hadn't she come looking for him? Alex left the bar in a hurry, the locket burning in his palm. He made his way to his ship, a rusty freighter he called the Iron Star. It wasn't much to look at, but it had gotten him through countless dangerous missions. He climbed aboard and powered up the systems, his mind racing with questions. Could this Silver Flame really be Surya? And if she was, would she even remember him? As the ship lifted off, Alex set a course for Thelios IV. The planet was infamous, a war-torn wasteland ruled by chaos and conflict. It was no place for civilians, but Alex wasn't just any civilian. He'd spent years as a mercenary, learning how to survive in the galaxy's most dangerous corners. He wasn't afraid of what he might face. What terrified him was the thought of finding Surya and discovering she wasn't the same person he'd loved and protected all those years ago. The journey was tense. Alex spent hours staring at the locket, remembering the day he gave it to her. They'd been sitting under the giant trees of their colony, hiding from the adults. She had been crying, scared of the strange new world she'd been brought into after being adopted by Alex's family. To comfort her, Alex had given her the locket, promising they would always stay together. But that promise had been shattered when the invaders came. The attack was swift and brutal. Alex had been dragged onto a rescue ship by his parents, screaming for Surya as the colony burned behind them. He'd never seen her again. The Iron Star exited hyperspace, and the scared surface of Thelios IV came into view. The planet was as bleak as the stories described, covered in ash and ruins. Alex's ship landed on the outskirts of a settlement, its streets teeming with armed aliens. He stepped out, his hand resting on the blaster at his side. The air was thick with tension, and every gaze felt like a threat. As he made his way through the settlement, Alex asked about the Silver Flame. Most ignored him, but one alien, a grizzled old trader, gave him a knowing look. If you're looking for her, you must have a death wish, the traitor muttered. She doesn't take kindly to strangers. I don't care, Alex replied. I have to see her. The traitor pointed toward the mountains in the distance. She's up there, leading her people. But be warned, she's not the girl you remember. Alex set off toward the mountains, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. Each step brought him closer to answers, but also to the possibility of heartbreak. Would Surya still be the sister he remembered, or had the years of war turned her into someone else entirely? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the mountains in shadow, Alex tightened his grip on the locket. He was close now. One way or another, he would find out the truth. And nothing, no danger, no enemy, would stop him. The war-torn world. The skies above Thelios IV were a swirling chaos of ash and fire. As Alex's ship descended into the planet's atmosphere, alarms blared in the cockpit. His sensors picked up countless warning signals. Enemy patrols, rogue fighters, and volatile weather conditions. Thelios IV wasn't a planet. It was a battlefield that never rested. The iron star shuddered as Alex maneuvered it through the turbulence. Outside the window, the planet's surface came into view, a bleak wasteland of crumbled cities and glowing craters. It wasn't a welcoming sight, but Alex's determination burned brighter than his fear. Somewhere down there, Surya might be alive. Brace yourself, Alex muttered to no one but the ship as he guided it toward a small clearing near the edge of a ruined city. The landing was rough, the ground trembling as the ship settled onto the scorched earth. Alex powered down the engines, grabbed his pack, and stepped outside. The air hit him like a punch, thick, acrid, and almost too heavy to breathe. He coughed and pulled his scarf over his face. Around him, the city loomed in ruins. Broken buildings jutted out of the ground like jagged teeth, and shadows seemed to move where they shouldn't. He didn't have to wait long to attract attention. The sound of boots crunching on debris echoed in the silence. Alex turned, hand resting on his blaster. A group of armed aliens emerged from the ruins, their weapons trained on him. They were tall, with scaly skin and glowing yellow eyes, and their movements were deliberate and predatory. Human, one of them growled, his voice a deep rumble. You've landed where you shouldn't. State your business. Alex raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. I'm looking for someone, he said. The one you call the Silver Flame. The aliens exchanged wary glances. One of them stepped forward, his weapon still aimed at Alex's chest. No one finds the Silver Flame unless she allows it. Turn back, or we'll make sure you leave in pieces. I can't do that, Alex replied, his voice steady. I've come too far. Before the alien could respond, a voice rang out, a woman's voice, sharp and commanding. Lower your weapons. The aliens froze and turned toward the source of the voice. Alex followed their gaze and saw a figure step out from the shadows of a crumbled building. She wore a hooded cloak that shimmered faintly, as if it were made of liquid metal. Her presence was magnetic, and her movements were precise, almost otherworldly. As she approached, she pulled back her hood, revealing her face. Alex's breath caught in his throat. It was her. It had to be her. Those sharp, familiar features. Those piercing silver eyes that seemed to glow against the backdrop of the ruins. Surya, Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. The woman's expression didn't change. She looked him up and down, her gaze cold and calculating. You have the wrong person, she said, her tone dismissive. Take him to the edge of the city and send him back. Alex stepped forward, ignoring the weapon still pointed at him. It's me, Alex. Don't you remember me? The woman hesitated for a fraction of a second, a flicker of recognition flashing in her eyes, before her expression hardened again. The Alex I knew is dead, she said flatly, just like the sister he lost. Alex felt a wave of anger and heartbreak wash over him. You don't get to decide that, he said, his voice rising. You're my sister, Surya, and I'm not leaving without you. The woman's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, An explosion rocked the ground nearby. Dust and debris filled the air, and Alex was knocked off his feet. The aliens shouted orders, forming a protective circle around the woman. Alex scrambled to his feet, coughing as the dust settled. In the distance, a group of heavily armed mercenaries emerged, their weapons blazing. They were targeting the woman, and by extension, him. The woman turned to the alien guards. "Get him out of here," she ordered. "I'll handle this." "No," Alex shouted, grabbing her arm. "I'm not leaving you again." Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, the icy mask she wore cracked just slightly. "You'll only slow me down," she said, pulling away. "If you want to help, stay alive." Before Alex could protest, she leaped into action, her movements swift and deadly. She was a blur, taking down attackers with precision and power that left Alex in awe. This wasn't the little girl he remembered. This was a warrior, a force of nature. As the chaos unfolded, one of the alien guards grabbed Alex and pulled him toward safety. "If she wanted you dead, you'd already be dead," the guard muttered. "Consider yourself lucky." Alex didn't resist. He allowed himself to be led away, but his mind was racing. That was Soraya. He was sure of it. But the sister he had known was gone, replaced by someone he didn't recognize. Still, one thing was clear. He wasn't leaving this planet without her. Secrets in the shadows. The cavern was silent except for the soft drip of water echoing in the dark. Alex sat on a cold stone bench, his hands tied behind his back. His head throbbed from the fight earlier, but his mind was sharper than ever. He glanced around, taking in the strange symbols carved into the walls. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like blood. The last thing he remembered was being knocked out by one of Soraya's guards as she fought off the mercenaries. Now he was deep underground, in what looked like an ancient hideout. The shadows seemed alive, shifting and twisting with every flicker of the torches. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Alex turned his head as Soraya stepped into the room, her cloak brushing the ground behind her. She looked different in this dim light. Her silver eyes glowed faintly, and her expression was unreadable. "I told them to leave you at the surface," she said coldly, crossing her arms. "Why are you still here?" Alex straightened, his voice steady despite his restraints. "Because I'm your brother, and I'm not giving up on you." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked closer, her sharp gaze studying him like he was a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. "You keep saying that," she said, her tone softening slightly. "But the Alex I knew wouldn't have survived a place like Thelio's IV. How do I know you're not just another liar trying to get close to me?" Alex leaned forward as far as his bindings allowed. "Do you remember the promise we made? The one under the willow trees before the attack?" Soraya froze, her eyes narrowing. For the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in her expression. "What promise?" "You were scared," Alex said, his voice quieter now. "Scared that you didn't belong. I gave you a knife and said, if we ever get separated, I'll come back for you. No matter what." He paused, his eyes locked on hers. "Do you still have it? The knife?" Soraya's expression hardened again, but there was something behind her eyes, something she couldn't quite hide. Slowly, she reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a small, worn knife. The blade was dull, the handle cracked, but it was unmistakable. Alex's heart clenched at the sight. "You kept it," he whispered. "I kept it," she admitted, her voice almost too soft to hear. "But that doesn't mean I trust you." Before Alex could respond, a loud crack echoed through the cavern, followed by the unmistakable sound of an explosion above. Dust and rocks rained down from the ceiling, and Soraya turned sharply toward the entrance. "They'd found us," she said, her voice suddenly sharp with urgency. "Who?" Alex asked, struggling against his bindings. "The mercenaries," Soraya replied, already moving toward the exit. "They've been hunting me for months. If they're here, they'll kill everyone." She paused, glancing back at Alex. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then, with a frustrated sigh, she pulled out a small blade and cut his bindings. "If you slow me down, you're on your own." Alex stood, rubbing his wrists. "I didn't come this far to slow you down," he said. "I came to help." Syria didn't respond. She motioned for him to follow and led him through a series of twisting tunnels. The air grew colder as they moved, the sound of distant gunfire growing louder with each step. Syria moved like a shadow, her every step precise and deliberate. Alex struggled to keep up, but he refused to fall behind. They emerged into a large chamber, where several of Syria's fighters were preparing for battle. Weapons were being handed out, and the tension in the air was palpable. When the fighters saw Alex, their expressions turned hostile. "He shouldn't be here," one of them growled, pointing a weapon at Alex. "Stand down," Syria ordered, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "He's with me." The fighter hesitated but eventually lowered his weapon. Syria turned to Alex, her expression unreadable. "If you're going to stay, you'll need to prove yourself. Otherwise, you're just another liability." Alex met her gaze without flinching. "What do you need me to do?" Syria handed him a small cylindrical device. "This is a signal jammer. The mercenaries are using drones to track us. If you can plant this at the surface, it'll buy us some time." "Got it," Alex said, gripping the device tightly. Syria hesitated, her silver eyes softening for just a moment. "Be careful," she said. "If they catch you, they won't show mercy." "I'll be fine," Alex replied. "Just don't get yourself killed." She gave him a faint smile, barely there, but enough to make Alex feel like he was finally breaking through her walls. Then, without another word, she turned and joined her fighters, barking orders as they prepared to defend their home. Alex made his way back toward the surface, the device clutched in his hand. The sounds of battle grew louder with every step, and his heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know if he could fully trust Syria yet, but one thing was clear: he wasn't going to let her fight this battle alone. Not again. The hidden truth. The cold metal of the medical bay was the first thing Alex felt as he opened his eyes. His vision was blurry, and his body ached as though he'd been trampled by a starship. He tried to move, but a sharp pain in his ribs forced him to stop. The faint hum of machinery surrounded him, accompanied by the soft beeping of the monitor. "You're awake." The voice was calm but distant, and as Alex's vision cleared, he saw Syria standing by the doorway, arms crossed. Her silver eyes, usually sharp and guarded, looked almost tired. "You're lucky to be alive," she said, stepping closer. "The mercenaries almost finished you off. My people wanted to leave you behind." "But you didn't," Alex muttered, his voice hoarse. "Why?" Syria didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed a data pad on the counter and leaned against the wall. "Because I owed you," she finally said. "You distracted them long enough for my people to escape. That was brave. Foolish, but brave." Alex let out a dry laugh, wincing at the pain it caused. "I'll take that as a compliment." The tension in the room was thick, and Alex could feel that Syria was holding something back. He watched as her gaze shifted, lingering on the small knife she carried on her belt, the same one he had given her all those years ago. "Syria," Alex said, his voice softer now. "Why won't you talk to me? Why won't you tell me what happened to you?" She flinched at the question, her expression hardening again. "You don't want to know," she said flatly. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," Alex countered, pushing himself upright despite the pain. "I've spent 30 years searching for you. Whatever it is, I can handle it." Syria's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Alex thought she might walk out of the room. But then, to his surprise, she sat down in the chair next to him. She stared at the floor, her fingers tracing the edge of the knife. "When the colony was attacked," she began, her voice low, "I wasn't taken by accident. The invaders wanted me. They knew I was different. Alex frowned, confusion flickering across his face. Different how? Syria hesitated, then looked up at him, her glowing silver eyes locking onto his. I'm not like the others. Not like the humans or even the species you've seen out there. I was engineered. A hybrid created to be something more. Stronger, faster, smarter. The invaders wanted to use me as a weapon. Alex's breath caught in his throat. A weapon. She nodded. They trained me, tested me, and turned me into something I didn't want to be. When I finally escaped, I swore I'd never let anyone control me again. That's why I fight. That's why I lead the rebellion. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. His little sister, the girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee, had been forced to become a warrior. A tool for destruction. But why didn't you look for me? Alex asked, his voice breaking. Why didn't you come back? Syria's expression softened, and for the first time, Alex saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. Because I thought you were dead, she said. I thought everyone was dead. And even if you weren't, how could I face you after what I'd become? Alex reached out, placing a hand on hers. You're still my sister, Syria. Nothing will ever change that. She didn't pull away, but she didn't respond either. Instead, she stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the dimly lit tunnels beyond. You shouldn't have come here, she said, her voice firm once more. You don't belong in this world. Maybe not, Alex admitted, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving without you. Syria turned back to him, her expression unreadable. If you stay, you'll have to fight. You'll have to face the kind of horrors you can't even imagine. I faced horrors before, Alex said, determination in his voice. I'm not afraid. She studied him for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. We'll see. Before Alex could say more, a sharp alarm blared through the medical bay. Syria's communicator buzzed, and she answered it quickly. A voice crackled through the device. They found us. The mercenaries are closing in. Syria's jaw tightened as she ended the call. She turned to Alex, her expression hard once more. Get ready. If you want to prove yourself, now's your chance. Alex swung his legs over the edge of the bed, ignoring the pain. What's the plan? Syria handed him a weapon, a sleek, alien-designed blaster. The plan is simple, she said. We survive. With that, she strode out of the room, leaving Alex to follow. As he gripped the blaster and limped after her, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The sister he had found was nothing like the girl he had lost, but maybe, just maybe, they could find each other again in the chaos. The enemy within. The firelight flickered across the walls of the underground bunker, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed alive. Alex sat on the edge of a makeshift cot, inspecting the blaster Syria had handed him earlier. It was sleek, alien, and far more advanced than anything he'd ever used. But it wasn't the weapon in his hands that troubled him. It was the heavy tension in the room. Syria stood by a long table covered in maps and data pads, speaking in hushed tones to her closest advisors. Her voice was calm, measured, but Alex could sense something beneath it. Fear. No, it wasn't fear. It was something darker. Something she didn't want him to see. Are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to guess? Alex asked, breaking the silence. Syria glanced at him, her silver eyes narrowing. You're not part of this discussion. I'm part of this fight now. Alex shot back, standing. And I'm not blind. Something's off. You're hiding something. The room went silent. Syria's advisors exchanged uneasy glances before one of them cleared his throat. We don't have time for family drama, he said, his tone dismissive. The enemy is closing in, and we need to act. Enough, Syria snapped, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. She turned to Alex, her expression hard. If you want to help, stay out of my way. This is bigger than you. Alex took a step forward, refusing to back down. I didn't come all this way just to sit on the sidelines. If there's something you're not telling me, I need to know. I'm not going to stand by while you keep secrets that could get us all killed. Suria's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Alex thought she might lash out. But then she sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. Fine, she said, her voice low. You want the truth. There's a spy in our ranks. The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. A spy, here, among your people? Syria nodded, her expression grim. Someone has been feeding information to the mercenaries. That's how they keep finding us. I've narrowed it down to a handful of suspects, but I haven't figured out who it is yet. Alex frowned, his mind racing. And you didn't think to tell me this earlier? Because it's not your problem. Syria snapped. This is my fight, my responsibility. I won't risk more lives than I already have. But it is my problem now, Alex argued. If there's a traitor among us, they could turn on us at any moment. We need to act fast. Syria didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned back to the table, her fingers tracing the edge of the map. I'm handling it, she said finally. I don't need your help. Alex could hear the weight in her voice, the strain of carrying the burden alone. You don't have to do this by yourself, he said, his tone softer now. Let me help you. Syria looked at him, her silver eyes unreadable. For a moment, Alex thought she might let him in, let him shoulder some of the weight. But before she could answer, the door to the bunker burst open. One of the guards stumbled in, blood streaking his face. Commander, he gasped, we've been betrayed. They're inside. The room erupted into chaos. Syria barked orders, her advisors scrambling to prepare for the attack. Alex grabbed his blaster and moved to her side. What's the plan? He asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his arm and pulled him close. Stay behind me, she ordered. I'll deal with this. Like hell I will, Alex replied, breaking free of her grip. We do this together. Before Syria could argue, the sound of gunfire echoed down the tunnels. The mercenaries were closing in, and the tension in the room was suffocating. Syria drew her weapon, her movements quick and precise. Let's go, she said, her voice cold as steel. They moved through the bunker, the walls shaking as explosions rocked the structure. The mercenaries were ruthless, cutting down anyone in their path. Alex fought alongside Syria, his blaster firing with a precision that surprised even himself. As they reached the central chamber, Syria froze. Standing in the center of the room was one of her trusted advisors, a man she had fought beside for years. He held a communicator in one hand and a blaster in the other. You, Syria hissed, her voice dripping with venom. It was you. The man smirked, lowering the communicator. It's nothing personal, he said. The mercenaries pay well. And you've become too much of a liability. Syria raised her weapon, her hand steady. You betrayed us. You betrayed me. And I'd do it again, the man sneered. You can't win this war, Syria. You're fighting a losing battle. Before he could say more, Alex stepped forward, his blaster aimed at the traitor's head. You don't know my sister, he said, his voice cold. She doesn't lose. The traitor's smirk faltered, but before he could react, Syria fired. The shot was clean, precise, and final. The man crumpled to the ground, his communicator clattering to the floor. For a moment, the room was silent except for the distant sounds of battle. Syria lowered her weapon, her expression unreadable. Let's finish this, she said, turning to Alex. Alex nodded, his grip tightening on his blaster. Together, they stepped into the chaos, ready to face whatever came next. The final betrayal. The air was thick with tension as Alex followed Syria through the narrow, dimly lit tunnels. The remnants of her rebel forces trailed behind them, their footsteps echoing faintly in the underground maze. The plan was simple, or so Syria had said. Infiltrate the mercenaries' central base, sabotage their operations, and destroy their communications array to sever their control over the region. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Soraya had been quiet, too quiet, ever since they left the bunker. Her usual sharp commands and precise focus were replaced by an unsettling stillness. She moved like a ghost, her silver eyes scanning every shadow, her fingers brushing the hilt of her blade. "Are you going to tell me what's really going on?" Alex finally asked, breaking the silence. Soraya didn't turn to face him. "I told you everything you need to know," she replied curtly. "No, you didn't," Alex pressed, his voice firm. "You're hiding something, Soraya. I can feel it." She stopped abruptly, spinning around to face him. The faint torchlight caught the sharp angles of her face, making her look almost inhuman. "This isn't the time for your questions, Alex," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Focus on the mission." "I'm trying to, but it's hard when I don't trust what you're not saying," Alex shot back. "If you want me to fight beside you, I need the truth." Soraya stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed and motioned for the others to keep moving. "Go ahead. I'll catch up," she said to the rebels. They hesitated but eventually obeyed, disappearing into the darkness. Once they were alone, Soraya crossed her arms and leaned against the tunnel wall. "You want the truth?" she asked, her tone cold. "Fine. Here it is. I made a deal." Alex froze. "What kind of deal?" "With the mercenaries," Soraya said, her voice sharp and bitter. "Months ago, before you showed up, they were closing in on us, ready to wipe us out. I negotiated a truce to buy us time. In exchange, I agreed to give them you." Alex stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. "What?" "They wanted the human who had been asking about me," she said, her gaze dropping for the first time. "They knew you were looking for me. They thought you were a threat. So I gave them your name." "You betrayed me," Alex whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. "After everything. After I came all this way for you, you sold me out." Soraya straightened, her eyes flashing with anger. "I didn't have a choice, Alex. They were going to kill everyone. I thought it would stop them." "And did it?" Alex demanded, his voice rising. "Because last I checked, they're still hunting you. They're still killing your people. What did your betrayal buy you, Soraya? A few extra weeks of running. A little more time to play hero." Soraya flinched, but her expression hardened quickly. "You don't understand what it's like," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't know what I've had to do to survive, to protect these people. If sacrificing one person meant saving hundreds, I..." "Don't," Alex interrupted, his voice cold. "Don't justify it. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we were." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was deafening, filled only with the distant rumble of the base's machinery. Soraya's hands clenched into fists at her sides, and Alex could see the conflict raging within her. "I didn't expect you to come for me," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you were dead. I thought I had nothing left to lose." Alex shook his head, his heart heavy with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "You had me, Soraya. You always had me." Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the tunnel. Both of them snapped to attention, their hands moving to their weapons. A squad of mercenaries appeared, their rifles raised and ready. "Commander Soraya," the leader of the squad called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "You didn't think you could fool us, did you? The deal's off. And now, you and your brother die." Soraya's eyes widened, and Alex saw a flicker of fear cross her face. Without hesitation, she stepped in front of him, her weapon raised. "If you want him, you'll have to go through me," she said, her voice steady and defiant. Alex stared at her, stunned. After everything, after her betrayal, she was still willing to protect him. The mercenaries opened fire, and chaos erupted. Alex and Soraya fought side by side, their movements instinctively coordinated despite the tension between them. The narrow tunnel amplified every shot, every scream, but Alex's focus never wavered. When the last mercenary fell, Soraya turned to him, blood streaking her face. "This isn't over," she said, her voice barely audible. "They'll keep coming." Alex nodded, his anger giving way to grim determination. "Then we'll keep fighting. Together." Soraya hesitated, then gave a small nod. For the first time, her walls seemed to crack just a little. Without another word, they moved deeper into the base, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Redemption and reunion. The air smelled of smoke and blood as Alex stumbled through the ruins of the mercenary base, his legs heavy with exhaustion. Fires raged around him, sending plumes of black smoke into the ash-filled sky. The once imposing structure now lay in ruins, its towering walls reduced to rubble. But Alex didn't care about the destruction or the danger. He cared about one thing, and one thing only. "Soraya," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Where are you?" There was no answer, only the distant crackle of flames and the groaning of unstable metal. Alex's chest tightened with panic. She had been right beside him when the final explosion went off. They had fought their way through the base, side by side, until the mercenaries set off their self-destruct sequence. He had tried to grab her, tried to pull her to safety, but the blast had separated them. "Soraya," he called again, stumbling over a fallen beam. His body ached, and his vision blurred, but he forced himself to keep moving. Then he saw it. Amidst the rubble, a faint glow, silver, soft, and otherworldly. His heart leaped as he scrambled toward it, ignoring the sharp pain in his legs and arms. When he reached the source of the light, he froze. Soraya lay sprawled on the ground, her cloak torn and her body covered in dust and blood. The glow was coming from her, specifically from her silver eyes, which flickered weakly as she looked up at him. "Alex." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough to make his heart ache. "I've got you," he said, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands trembled as he checked her injuries. A deep gash ran along her side, and her breathing was shallow. "Stay with me, Soraya. Don't you dare give up now." She gave him a faint smile, her hand reaching out to touch his face. "You're stubborn," she said, her voice soft, but laced with a hint of teasing. "Just like I remember. And you're still a pain." Alex replied, his throat tightening. "But you're my sister, and I'm not losing you again." Her smile faltered, and a shadow passed over her face. "Alex, you can't save me. My body. It's not like yours. The damage, it's too much." "Don't say that," he snapped, his voice shaking. "We'll find a way. I'll carry you out of here if I have to." "No," she whispered, gripping his hand weakly. "Listen to me. There's something I need you to do." Alex shook his head, refusing to listen. "No, we're getting out of here together." "Alex," she said firmly, her voice stronger for a moment. Her silver eyes bore into his, and he froze. The rebellion, it needs a leader. They need someone they can trust, someone who believes in hope. That's you. "No," Alex said, his voice breaking. "Don't put this on me. You're the leader. You're the one they follow." "They followed me because they didn't have a choice," Soraya said, her voice softening again. "But you can give them something I never could. A reason to fight beyond survival. A reason to hope." Tears blurred Alex's vision as he gripped her hand tightly. "I can't do this without you." "You can," she said, her smile returning, faint but genuine. "You always could." Before Alex could respond, the sound of voices and footsteps reached them. He turned to see a group of Soraya's rebels approaching, their faces filled with shock and sorrow as they took in the scene. One of them, a tall alien with sharp features, stepped forward. "Commander Soraya," the alien said, his voice trembling. We thought you were gone." "She's not going anywhere," Alex said, his voice fierce. "Help me get her out of here." The alien hesitated, glancing at Soraya, who gave him a faint shake of her head. "No," she said softly. "This is where my fight ends." The rebels froze, their expressions filled with grief. Alex looked at them, then back at Soraya. "No," he said again, his voice breaking. "I won't let you give up." Soraya's hand tightened around his. "It's not giving up," she said. "It's letting go." For a moment, Alex couldn't speak. He felt the weight of her words, the finality of them, and it crushed him. But then he saw the peace in her eyes, the quiet strength that had carried her through so much pain and loss, and he realized that she wasn't afraid. "Soraya," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." She smiled at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "Don't be. You found me. That's all I ever wanted." Her hand went limp in his, and Alex felt his heart shatter. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the rebels stood in silent mourning. For a long time, Alex didn't move. He just held her, his tears falling silently onto her still form. But as the fires began to die down, and the first rays of dawn pierced the smoke-filled sky, he looked up. The rebels were watching him, their faces filled with uncertainty and hope. And in that moment, Alex understood what Soraya had meant. Her fight was over, but his was just beginning. He stood slowly, cradling her locket in his hand. "We keep moving," he said, his voice steady. "We finish what she started." The rebels nodded, their resolve hardening. Together, they turned and walked away from the ruins, leaving the past behind and stepping into a future shaped by the sacrifice of one extraordinary woman.